What's up, everybody? Marvel the Cross 316 back on another comic book flashback. Today we are looking at Daredevil, issue number 11. This issue came out in December of 1965, and today we're going to conclude the storyline that's going on with this whole organizer and his organization. We have a lot going on. I mean, pretty cool cover here, I have to say myself. So I'm just so glad that you're joining me today as we continue to look at this series. We're finally going to figure out the identity of the organizer. So that's going to be pretty cool. So let's go ahead now and get started. Today's title is A Time to Unmask. And so we have a lot going on. Last issue we saw Foggy Nelson running for the office of district attorney on the new reform ticket. But Foggy doesn't suspect that one of the members of the Reform Party is really the evil organizer, Kingpin of Crime. Meanwhile, the fearless Daredevil learns that Debbie Harris, Foggy's college-day girlfriend, is actually in cahoots with the organizer's mob. But before he can make a move, the Birdman attacks, and that's where we left off last issue, as Birdman is about to attack Daredevil here. So what's going to happen now? We're soon going to figure this all out. And as always, before we get started, let's give credit where credit is due. This issue is brought to you by Stan Lee, who wrote this issue. We have Wally Wood on the inking, Bobby Powell on the penciling, and Sam Rosen on the lettering page. And so there's a little bit of a quick summary of what's going on. So let's dive on in. We see that Daredevil was prying on this conversation taking place with Debbie Harris and the Ape-Man and Frog-Man. And we see here that Daredevil is now going to come up against the Birdman, and he does something that the Birdman doesn't suspect, which is basically he falls back, and we see in the concluding panels here that Daredevil flies through this window here, this glass window. He's like, "Hey, are you going to pay for that?" And Daredevil's like, "I'll put that on my Diners Club account." So we see here that Deborah Harris is in cahoots with the organization, and we see here that she wants the Ape-Man to tie her up to this chair to act like she's actually basically being bound to this chair, that she's actually innocent. So Daredevil comes, releases her from her chair. He knows that she's up to no good, so he's going to then follow her, and he listens in on the conversation. She's on the phone with the organizer, and she still has the orders to basically use Foggy Nelson. And we're soon going to figure out exactly how Foggy Nelson is tied up into all this. She runs back into the arms of Foggy Nelson, and Foggy is just basically putty in the hands of this woman. I mean, she's using Foggy Nelson, and it's just not right, I have to say. So you see here that Daredevil is seen outside the window, and now Daredevil has a big, basically, detective. He's going to act like a detective here. He has this whole mystery going on as to who is the organizer. We see that the Catman is still being questioned here, and we know that one of the people that could be a suspect is Abner Jonas. And so keep that name in mind here as we continue to look at this story. We see that basically Matt Murdock is going to confront, as we see here, Foggy Nelson, and Foggy Nelson thinks that basically Matt Murdock is jealous of him, but we're soon going to find out that basically Matt Murdock is trying to just help his friend out. So we see here as we continue, these are the three suspects that we got to keep in mind. Bernard Harris, he was the candidate for borough president. We have Abner Jonas, candidate for mayor, and then Milton Monroe, candidate for assemblyman. And so we have these three guys. We have to figure out which one of them is the organizer. We see here that Matt and Foggy then come to these three guys saying that they found out the organizer's identity is locked up into this safe in the office. And so all three of these guys know. This guy here, we see here, Abner Jonas acts like it's no big deal, and he'll tell the police that they can come and get it. But then, as we see, the organizer tells his lackeys here, these guys basically working for him, that now they got to go and basically get that safe away from the police. They got to get it out of the hands of the police. So now the organizer knows. So we see here that Foggy Nelson, Matt Murdock, and Karen Page are walking to their office when all of a sudden we see here that Matt Murdock notices that there's a guy rifling through all that stuff, and it is the organizer himself. So basically, Matt Murdock comes up with a distraction here. He pretends to stumble. This way, Karen Page comes across that there was, in fact, somebody within that office. We see that then Foggy Nelson begins to act like he's defeated here. He's like, man, I was a fool. I should have known all along. So we're going to try to figure out exactly, again, the big mystery. Who is the organizer? See that Daredevil then is going to come back into some action here. And this time, the organizer is going to threaten Debbie Harris because she's acting like she wants to basically get out of the league with him. So there's a whole connection. There has to be a connection between Debbie Harris and the organizer. See that Daredevil comes to the aid of Debbie Harris and says to her, look, if you follow my lead, I will keep you out of harm's way. So we soon see that she gives the location of the Frogman, and Daredevil is going to come up against the Frogman, takes the Frogman down, and then we see here that Matt Murdock is going to dress up as the Frogman and then puts the Daredevil costume on the Frogman. And then a note is delivered to the police saying, take good care of my duds. This guy only borrowed them to learn the truth about the organizer. Tune in to this wavelength. So that's what the police are going to do. We see then that a disguised Daredevil in this Frogman costume is going to then confront the organizer. The organizer thinks it's the Frogman, but now we know that Daredevil is going to pry into this secretive organization. We had the police, they're looking through all this. It's even interrupted on the TV as it's being filmed right now, as we see the Frogman, this fake Frogman who is the Daredevil, is basically filming this. We see the organizer realizes this and tells the Ape-Man and the Birdman to take down Daredevil here, who they think is the Frogman. A secret hatch is released, and we see that Daredevil then falls, maybe a couple of feet, probably about 10 feet to the ground. That way, the organizer and his men are able to escape as the police arrive on the scene. We see that then a very weak Daredevil gets up to his feet, and he says, I have a spare costume that he puts on, and he puts on that spare costume. We soon see that the organizer gets back on the television and puts his broadcast with his final message saying that this isn't the last that you've heard of him, and I will return. And we see here that there's just more suspicion going on as to who the organizer is, and then Foggy Nelson is going to confront this guy, this Abner Jonas guy. And he's like, I think it's you, Foggy. You're the one that's always not or in the shadow of Matt Murdock. And he's trying to come up with an excuse here. So maybe Abner Jonas is the one. We see then that the men, basically, who are work for the organizer, then come to the aid of Abner Jonas to act like they're going to take him away. So we can conclude that this is the organizer. As you'll soon find out, we see Daredevil then attacks the Birdman and Ape-Man, and we have a huge action scene once again drawn by Wally Wood. Great action scene by Bobby, and so just awesome stuff. You see that Daredevil is going to easily take down the Ape-Man and the Birdman here as we see more action taking place. We see that Abner Jones tries to get away, and Daredevil tells Foggy that, look out, you need to tackle him. And so we see that Foggy is going to then tackle Abner Jonas. He tries to alert, but then we see that basically Ape-Man attacks Daredevil once again. So much action taking place. It's kind of hard to explain everything that's going on, but basically Daredevil takes down the Ape-Man, takes down the Birdman, and we soon find out that the police arrive on the scene, and Daredevil is now going to use his radar sense to figure out where the organizer went to. You see that Foggy was correct and basically was able to figure out that this guy actually was the organizer by taking him down as ordered by the Daredevil. And so we soon figure out here that Abner Jonas was the one, because Daredevil noticed that there was this ring on Jonas's finger here, and that's what the organizer wore when he was in his costume. And so we still see that Foggy Nelson thinks that Daredevil's a hero, and maybe Foggy's just not cut out to be who he wants to be, which is basically the district attorney. So the next morning, in the office of Nelson and Murdoch, we have Karen Page and Foggy, and they're talking, and then she kisses Foggy on the cheek here to encourage him to stop beating yourself up. See that Matt Murdock arrives on the scene. He notices that she kissed him. And then we have this very big news that we're going to figure out here, or find out rather, is that Matt Murdock wants to leave the company of Foggy Nelson and Karen Page. He doesn't want to work there anymore. He's wanting to go travel and just use some free time on his own. We see that Foggy then says good riddance, but then he apologizes. And we see that Karen Page is really feeling bad about this. She doesn't want Matt Murdock to leave, but she has no choice in telling Matt Murdock he can't go. And she says she basically thinks that if Foggy Nelson proposes once again, she'll say yes. And so we have a very distraught Karen Page who doesn't want Matt Murdock to leave, but we're soon basically going to see what's going to happen next issue as we see a new life of Matt Murdock and what he's up to, as he's not working with Foggy Nelson anymore. He said that he will return, but it's going to be quite some time before that happens. And so what's going to happen next issue as we look at issue number 12? I hope to see you then. And until next time, keep reading comics.